Andy, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry about that.
Introduction, yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. My name's Andy Gorski. I'm a performance strategy lead for Kitman Labs. What does that mean? What is a performance strategist? First and foremost, I saw you all putting your hands up before in terms of who's a developer, who's a product manager. It's I can see a very tech-heavy room. I am not a developer. I am not a product manager. I'm not a data scientist. I work very much on the client side of the business. And basically, performance strategist. I'm basically strategic account management. So I work with our strategic partners, making sure that we're delivering against their needs and we're delivering what they've got. Life hasn't always been that way. There you go. Life hasn't always been that way. I started out as a professional rugby league player, a 14-year career and 7 different clubs, so somewhat of a journeyman. Or as I thought at the time, what I was actually doing was building my network, because I've understood that now. I was exposing myself to lots of different coaches and lots of different physios and things that really became useful in my life now in my current guys. Don't look quite as happy there as I'm bracing for impact. 2002 I did a sports science degree, so while I was still finishing off my academy learnings in rugby league, I took on a sports science degree. I knew that rugby wasn't going to last forever and I was going to need something in the back pocket for when those days came. 2011 I joined a company called the Sports Office, completely by chance, to be honest. When I was at this point here, I never in a million years would have expected I'd be studying talking to a room full of tech people in here. And until that fateful day when I went to one of my best friend's weddings and met my them would-be employers at the end of the night, by the way, so I've been drinking all day by this point. I got a phone call the day after to say, yeah, we'd like you to come in. It was a great point because I was sort of transitioning then. I knew I wasn't quite as quick as good at rugby as I used to be, so I knew that I was going to have to look for that next real job, as my mother used to like to call it. So I got the phone call. So I like to joke that, there it is. It's my boss. Got the phone call. Yeah, so I certainly wouldn't recommend being drunk for your first job interview, but it worked out quite well for me. For the next 8 years then, so the Sports Office was a startup. I was the 5th person in the company that started as a client manager. They were starting to grow in business. We just signed, I think, Man City, and was in tender for another 1 or 2 other big contracts. And it was very much learning the trade. So although I was a client manager, we did do product management, we tested the product, we were designing it on Word and in Paint, and there was no such thing as wireframes then. It was just kind of coming up with ideas. We had 1 engineer. But over the next 8 years, we became very successful in the UK. We got league-wide deals with Premier League, with the RFU, ECB, IRFU, and kind of grew a strong business in the UK. Completely self-funded business as well. They hadn't taken the investment, so we weren't really at a point where we could scale and go bigger, which is where Kitman Labs come in. So Kitman Labs, in 2020, the month before COVID hit, bought the company, a lot of investment, which probably saved our lives, to be honest, because sports sort of plummeted, and a lot of people couldn't pay then, the sport wasn't being played, as many other businesses did. So I continued my career there with Kitman Labs as a performance strategist, and also took on a role of head of migrations there for a while. So I did have a little bit of technical skill set there. That was really just because of the transition of getting the Sports Office customers then onto the new product. So I oversaw that really. Again, I'm not a developer. I went into the technical details of doing the migration, but just managing that process. Okay, my story is not unique at Kitman Labs. There's lots of people within our business that have come from a sporting background. This is our founder and CEO, Stephen Smith. He was a rehabilitation coach at Leinster Rugby, and he was tasked at the time with trying to reduce the injury rates of the club. The club had a very successful thing, a lot of world-class players. They were winning the league 1 year, maybe won the European Cup, and then the year after were dropping off, and they had real problems with keeping that consistency. So he started to look into the data and that side of it to try and reduce the number of injuries and keep performances on the beat. He had good support from, I think Michael Checker was the manager at the time, and this grew into the idea of Kitman Labs and started to help other sports organisations using data to improve their performance there. So started out sort of in Excel and building that way, and then eventually decided to leave the rugby scene and do this full time. This is the sort of the challenge, I suppose, at the moment. And we've got the data boom there. Thinking back to Tim's presentation, you saw the amount of information that was collected there just on Maria. You multiply that now by a professional athlete, and not just one professional athlete. You've got 30 and 40 in that squad. You've also got then throughout the academy, the whole team. So the amount of data points is overwhelming for those practitioners, and to know to understand like what's important, how many things you can measure, so many things. You've all put your hands up before in terms of tracking devices, and you're tracking without even knowing it. You're not even asking it to do it, but you can get so much information. So we've seen this data boom, up to the point where in 2014, in the database we've seen up to 95,000 sort of athlete data points per athlete per year, up to like well into the millions now in 2025, and that's going to continue to go, as you can see, with more and more technology and more devices. So that's the challenge. I mean, that's one of the challenges, knowing the data. The other part is it working in sport is then trying to get sports, people, coaches who've been coaching for 30 years to then engage with the data and use that data. So you're not in there. I know, but like, so when I was playing rugby there, we had somebody sat in the stands actually counting the tackles on there, and you get a piece of paper at the end of the game. In terms of now, like, data is readily available. The players are ready for it. They want it, and the staff do too. So there's more of that available. So this conceptually is our product. We have the intelligence platform, the Kitman Labs intelligence platform. We provide solutions, you can see at the far end there, solutions for all departments within a sports organisation, whether it's talent development, whether it's coaching, the strength and conditioning, medical, or even the front office, we have a solution in place there. Organisation is modular, so they can kind of pick or choose how much of the product they want. The idea being that goes into a centralised operating system, so that the collaborative decision can be making, and then what the output is on the end there really is dependent on what the organisation wants to achieve. So sports and organisations are very similar. They all want to achieve success, but how they want to do it and what their goals are can be very different. Some organisations might just want to buy players in, others want to develop that up. So we work with the organisations in order to work that with them. Just to give you a bit of a schematic. So data in, we have over 150 integrations. So again, whether you walk or your different devices, your GPS devices, and the market's saturated with this. There's so many different technologies, and there's more every single day. So that's a constant work stream for us to do that. But allowing organisations to get all this data into one place, into IP. We do a data health assessment with that. So our data science team will work with clubs and sports organisations to do an assessment. Often that is a barrier to actually getting the insights out. Just because you've collected lots and lots of information doesn't mean it's in a good enough state to be able to drive some meaningful insights out of it, and often just the education at that point. Okay, this information you've been collecting here for 3 years, you need to do it in this more structured way, you need to have this data on this day. So there's an education piece there. Transforming that into useful data. We have a dashboarding system within the platform, as you'd imagine from any CRM or operating system. It's not a BI tool, but you can connect out there through APIs to other reporting systems. We also have a data science team, and we can work with our organisations on specific data projects there too. So that gives you an idea about sort of who we are, what we do, and what the product. In terms of who we work with, this is a sample. We actually have over 2,000 teams globally now. I've highlighted some of the sort of leagues and governing bodies because that's the area that I work with. So working with some, you can see just from the badges on there, some of the biggest brands in the world: NFL, Premier League, the FA, MLS, and lots of different sports. Focusing in on, again, back to the start in terms of the organisations that I work with, and the commonality in these, and then we'll get more into the actual use cases. So one common thread with all of these, so we provide the system for all of rugby union in the UK and in Ireland, men's and women's. Women's football, all of the WSL 1 and 2. With the Premier League, we have all 92 any professional club in the league, but at the academy level, so from under 9s to under 21s, and we'll come back to that a little bit more. And the common thread with all of these is always player health, the medical records. One for the governance and protection of the players and the staff. So there's a legal requirement for when you go to the doctors, you see that they'll put all the information into the system. In sport, and certainly in these sports, then our platform is the one for that. To give you an example with English rugby. So there's players out over in Australia at the moment playing for Lions, there's players in Argentina playing for England. As their records are getting added onto the system there, that's going back live to their club. So the club practitioners can switch on the system at Saracens and see the information and the GPS data and things that's flowing through. So we have that player record that travels with a player as they go through. They also will all run injury surveillance programs, so they're taking these large data sets to understand what's happening in their sport. That can be used then to inform rule changes. You know, if they're getting certain types of injuries, too many of certain type of injuries, how do they look at that? You can use that to inform best practice back within the clubs to help educate people how to manage these injuries better. So that medical part of the system is probably a common thread there. Now there's lots of different ways I could have gone round today. As I said, each organisation we work with has their own unique needs. Chose to zoom in a little bit on the Premier League projects. I think that's probably something we can all connect to, and that's more on the player development pathway and the work that we do there. So as I said, we work with kind of all 92 clubs, and that was led from originally from the Premier League in 2012-2013 season, implemented a game-wide strategy called the Elite Player Performance Plan, or EPP. And the idea of that was it's to grow more and better homegrown players. So the Premier League as a product at the top end was making so much money and was the best product in the world. More European players coming into the game, they were making more money from TV deals, but the number of English players that were then being able to make it at the top level was dropping significantly. And in fact, I think this is like the year after England failed to qualify for the Euro, so something had to be done. Premier League were to kind of step in it and do that. Now this is a strategy that's been going, as you think, for over 10 years, and they've just had a revamp recently, but has had massive impact on the game, and you've seen that success with the England teams. We've not, football's not quite come home yet, but we're trying our best with that. With the idea being, now as they implemented this strategy, so this was everything across staffing, resources, but they were the first, probably I think of any to do it, where they also implemented the technology. So they put the system in place, which was then the sports office, now the Kitman labs, to record all of this information across all of the academy pathway. So I picked out a few examples. So at the heart of this, the idea was that if a player makes it into a first team in the Premier League, but started in the academy at under 9, like what did that journey look like? If you'd have asked that 10 years ago, it's impossible to kind of find that information out. It was in somebody's laptop, it was on someone's Excel, it was in the coach's mind, it was on a piece of paper in a bookshelf, but now we got that centralised, and that was the idea that over that lifetime we would find that. So the player development journey is central to that. So similarly with the medical record, this is information that will travel with the player throughout their academy journey. So it's not uncommon for players to move between multiple academies and eventually make it into a team. Now, on a scale of 92 clubs, each of those clubs has got an under-9s to under-21s. You're talking, 9,000 players each year, and a lot of information is travelling through the system. We're now at a point, 13 years into the journey, where we've got this database of information. But every single training session, every match that they play, every minute, every goal scored should be in the system. There's obviously a human element. We're relying on the staff in order to input that for a lot of that. Every injury, physical testing, life skills, there's an education element. Players are taken out of schools to go and train with the club, so there's a responsibility there from the clubs to provide that. And at the top level, it will move around with the player, but you can imagine the information that's now available to the Premier League to do that anonymously. So that's kind of the central concept of this, that they will have that information. If we dive into some really specific use cases, this should hopefully be interesting to people in the room who've maybe got children, or you may have children that play in the academy system, but the growth and maturation, so predictive analysis on growth rates and maturation timing. So these players are coming in at 9-year-old and going all the way to 21s. That period between around 11 to 16, where kids are all growing at different rates. Now, every year you're playing in the academy, you're playing in your age group, so your age band are playing against other 11-year-olds, other 12-year-olds. It's not quite a level playing field. You'll all remember back to your school days, I'm sure, there was always one kid who was like 16 when the rest of you were kind of 12. Well, that's not, that's the same in football too. The way that affects it, there's always been a massive age bias. So clubs would recruit in players that are 11. He's not really, he is 11 years old, but physically, he's much older. So naturally, he's performing better than all of you. Maybe not technically as good, but relying on all the physical attributes that they've got to score the goals, and we've seen this age bias throughout the academy. So by providing this information to coaches and the medics and the staff, they can make decisions based on, all right, this kid's technically good, we can see that he's not big enough or strong enough yet. That doesn't mean we're going to lose them out of the academy, because this will now tell you that we can predict at what point they're going to start to mature, and also what their adult stature will be, so how tall they will be. That can really make some life-changing decisions there, where they don't boot a player out of the academy for not being big enough or strong enough. They can survive through the system and compete against those that are stronger than them, and then they generally have a longer career because they're physically peaking at a later time. It can also help with injury risk. Players, when they're going through that peak height velocity, much more susceptible to injuries as well. So it helps the staff around them to modify their training and their development programs to maximise basically where they're at physically. They're doing some really interesting stuff with this as well. So rather than just grouping by age now, they'll group people by their sort of biological age. So making players train up and maybe older players that aren't as physically mature training down and training in your kind of physical profiles. On to another one, they do so physical benchmark testing. So 3 times a year, the top 30 academies in the UK get physically tested by Premier League. So for speed, power, endurance, there's a battery of tests. They do 8 tests. That information again is collected into the intelligence platform, and what that does is it allows clubs to, again, instead of just seeing how that player performs within that group, within that club, I can look at my under 16, who I think is the fastest player I've ever seen, and actually compare them against every under 16 that's ever taken this test within the academy system. You can do that over a number of years, again, 13-year data set. Not only can you do that for the chronological age, but because of the growth and maturation stuff. So again, it might be the fastest 13-year-old in the club, but when you compare them against how physically old it really is, might end up looking average, and it just helps with all of those decision-making points through the development career. You can also do that positionally, so by doing your different selections, you'll get it. We've got zeros in here because we couldn't expose like what the actual results there, but you'll have to take one through. Okay, so where we're at now then. So all of this information, as I said, there's big data sets there, and where Premier League or where the game is going for it. The idea of having that so that you could get a picture, of the pathway to see what that takes. So they're now doing some really interesting research in there to be able to answer these questions. So these are questions that can be asked at an individual organisation level. What does it take for a player to make it into the first team at Burnley? And they'll have their own profile for what that looks like to be for the player in that club. But if the data there can be used to inform best practice and back within the academy system, then that's feeding back into that main point right at the start in terms of having more and better homegrown players, and eventually maybe football will come home. Who knows? But that's kind of what the whole idea would be. But in order to be able to do that, you need that data foundation, and that's where we're providing that operating system to be able to do that, to organise the information so that you can draw on those meaningful insights. That's everything I had for you today. We will be, I think there's some questions later. As I said to you at the start, I am not a developer, I am not a product manager, so go easy on some of those technical questions.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.